The early years of the Junior League of St. Petersburg, which began as a junior service club, could not have been worse ones for St. Petersburg. The club was formed in 1927. The year before was the beginning of the collapse of the real estate boom that had transformed a small village of farmers and fishermen into a bustling city. It was followed several years later by the stock market crash. Unemployment in St. Petersburg soared. At one point, every bank in the city was forced to close. The roots of the Junior League began on December 1st, 1927, in the telephone exchange business located at 834 First Avenue North. When Miss Ida Dan, a Pinellas County school attendance officer, approached 4 St. Petersburg women to discuss local problems. It was through this simple yet meaningful discussion with Malin Holland Barton, Martha Eustace, Betty Collins, and Margaret Wallace that the mission of the Junior Service Club was formed to help provide food and clothing to families in need. During its beginning decade, first as a junior service club, then as a Junior League of St. Petersburg, this small group of women organized a solicitation and distribution system of new and used clothes for needy families. They established the Milk Fund, providing milk daily for 151 underprivileged children. They opened clinics for well babies and sick babies, and they also purchased the first baby incubator for Mound Park Hospital. There were hard tasks and difficult issues, but they never shied away. During a short 3-year period, 1927 to 1931, the club went through the process of applying 2 times to be a member of the Association of Junior Leagues of America. The first application was turned down. The second application, however, was approved. On March 4, 1931, St. Petersburg was admitted. There were only 3 other leagues in Florida: Miami, Jacksonville, and Tampa. On that date, March 4, 1931, there were 55 charter members of the Junior League of St. Petersburg. Many of their descendants are members of the league today. The first decade of the Junior League of St. Petersburg was not only busy, but it was life-changing, both for the league and for our community. During this period of time, the Junior League established a dental clinic for children, paid for the city's first trained social worker, opened a daycare center for poor working women, outfitted the new children's ward at Mound Park Hospital. They also produced children's radio shows and established a bureau for neglected children. Most of these programs evolved into federal, state, and city programs that still exist to this day. The League was so successful at organizing and so committed that a visiting Association of Junior Leagues of America director suggested establishing a curfew forbidding league business after 6 p.m. or on Sundays. League members today still wrestle with the issue of balancing league and personal commitments. The League was resourceful in those days in underwriting these ambitious programs and projects. They wielded in-kind services from local businesses. They established a formula for fundraising that is still in place today. Throw fun parties and make people pay to come. They produced a cabaret. They became shop girls for a day at a local department store, receiving a percentage of sales. They even sponsored an amateur boxing match. When the bank holding their milk fund closed, they went public, and several milk companies stepped in and gave milk away. For themselves, they formed special interest committees devoted to art, needlework, books, and public affairs, and they began publishing a newsletter. In the early 1940s, well into the second decade, the Junior League directed much of its resources and members' energies into the war effort. Contributions were made to the USO and the Red Cross. The League served as chairman of the Women's Division of all War Bond Drive programs and victory drives after World War II. Book Spring Adventure premiered on the radio on WTSP, and our beloved puppet show began. The League also gave funds to a daycare center and to the Crippled Children's Hospital, and purchased, outfitted, and staffed a bookmobile that traveled to schools that did not have libraries. This was the first bookmobile in the state of Florida. The thrift shop continued to be a philanthropic effort throughout the war and after for the Junior League of St. Petersburg. The women also held talent shows and theme balls to raise funds for their projects. If there was ever a golden age of the Junior League of St. Petersburg, it was in the 1950s and 60s. This was the time when most of League members put their energies into volunteering, as very few Junior Leaguers were in the workforce. The League's continuing source of revenue was its thrift shop. Each active member was required to contribute a certain amount of usable and sellable merchandise. To bolster its inventory, the League gave a bundles coffee each fall. The event was held at a showplace home of one of the active or sustaining members. Once the theme was selected, and they varied on their themes, the committee went into full gear. The invitations were sent on brown paper bags and mailed to guests, who in turn filled them and brought them to the party. In 1953, the Junior League of St. Petersburg reached into the cultural realm and voted to sponsor a symphony for young listeners. The first symphony, attended by elementary and junior high school students in Lower Pinellas, was so successful that the school officials asked the League to expand the program and make it available to as many students as possible. Over the 14 years that the League sponsored the Symphony for Young Listeners, some 120,000 students were introduced to classical music and were able to experience a live orchestra in the Performing Arts Center. The League was a multifaceted organization when it came to reaching out to the community. Recognizing there was a need for a special school for mentally retarded children in Pinellas County, in 1956, the League voted to donate $10,000 towards equipping a pre-vocational room and for a building fund for Park School. When League members watch WEDU Channel 3, they can take great pride in the fact in 1957, the Junior League of St. Petersburg was instrumental in establishment of the educational station. That year, Florida West Coast Educational Television needed $6,000 to file a permit with the Federal Communications Commission for a license. The League provided the money, and the television committee conducted a publicity campaign to educate the public as to the value of educational TV. For many years, Junior League volunteers volunteered their time at WEDU. The League was instrumental in getting the Science Center of St. Petersburg off and running. In 1961, the League gave an additional $10,000 for the director's salary and partial salary for his assistants. One of the League's most daring projects was its involvement in the very controversial fluoridation campaign. The League's legislative committee spent 3 years studying the proposal and pulled together a citizens group for fluoridation. A lot was learned during those years. One of the League's biggest contributions to the community during the 1960s was to the Museum of Fine Arts. The League voted to give the money to build the entrance hall of what would become the city's most beautiful museum. The opulent chandelier was given in memory of the League's president, Ruth Brooks. Founding League member Malin Holland Barton gave the fabulous pier glass mirrors, and Dorothy Hobach donated the antique parlor grand piano that at one time graced the elegant entryway. The other big contributions made by the League came in 1969 when it made a $36,000 commitment to All Children's Hospital for its cardiovascular laboratory and cardiology department. By the fourth decade, more and more members were entering the workforce. Their daytime job kept them from attending and meeting placement requirements. The Public Relations Committee began publishing a newsletter for working members called League Echoes. In 1963, the League professionals were polled to see if they would like to have a regular monthly meeting. A positive response was received, and it was unanimous. In 1964, the standing rules were changed to provide for monthly night membership meetings. The meetings were held on Monday night before the Tuesday monthly meeting. However, it was not until 1970 that the professional members were given the right to vote at their night membership meetings. The 1970s were a time of prosperity but increasing social change. The Junior League itself began to change. More professional women were joining the ranks and were finally given voting rights at membership meetings. But the leadership, both locally and nationally, was slow to respond to their special needs as volunteers, especially placements that accommodated their work schedules. The day and night members continued to meet separately for the most part, having a few combined night meetings every year. Unrest grew on both sides, and membership retention became an internal issue for the very first time for the Junior League of St. Petersburg. The League's external priorities began to shift too. Historically, the organization supported agencies with funds and volunteers for several years with a goal of helping them towards self-sufficiency. The Juvenile Welfare Board, WEDU, the Science Center, and the Museum of Fine Arts were all examples of that philosophy in the past. The League continued to sponsor new organizations during the 1970s. For example, members threw their support behind Palisades Theater, now known as American Stage, Pinellas Association for Retarded Children, PARC, the Pinellas Marine Institute, Ronald McDonald House, and the Spouse Abuse Center that evolved into CASA, providing multi-year funding and volunteer commitments. However, there was a growing desire to take on a big project. In 1976, League undertook probably its most complex project in its history. Known as Project Concern, it was a partnership with the City of St. Petersburg to start a crime prevention program. It was funded by a federal grant of $200,000 and more than $100,000 from the League over a 3-year period. The objective was to create a community-based system of policing that would involve neighborhoods. The idea was a good one, but ahead of its time, and it quietly went away. However, 2 decades later, the idea was resurrected by the city and is now a successful community policing program. The experience was a learning one for the Junior League and heralded changing times. St. Petersburg was now full of organizations and agencies, mostly begun with the help of the League. And these agencies were competing for dollars and volunteers, along with the Junior League. With more options for women to be involved in the community, its social supremacy was no longer unquestioned. Internally, the League took small steps to reach out to working women and women of color. Still, as the Junior League of St. Petersburg began its 5th decade, it appeared to be on strong footing. Its major ways and means, the thrift shop, prospered. The members voted to produce Follies, the first one in decades. But like the 1970s, changing mores in the 1980s would bring new challenges to the League that would require continued adaptation. By the 1980s, the makeup of the Junior League of St. Petersburg had completely changed. In 1981, over half of the members were employed outside of their homes. Rather than lose these members, the Professional Advisory Committee worked to make the League a viable option for women in the workforce. The Junior League of St. Petersburg also adopted a non-discriminatory admission policy during this decade. In 1978, the Association of Junior Leagues International embraced a formal statement encouraging members to end de facto segregation and reach out to women of all races, religions, and national origins. Membership no longer would rely on a committee that cast secret yeas and nays. Residency requirements were revamped, and the age limit to become a provisional was raised to 45. In this decade, the thrift shop continued to be a major source of revenue for League projects, new and continuing. In 1984, for example, the thrift shop earned $90,000, and in 1986 it turned over $79,000 to the League. In the mid-'80s, the Junior League became very involved in the establishment of Great Explorations, the hands-on museum. Originally, the museum was to have been part of a cluster of 3 museums along the north side of the pier approach. The League was instrumental in finding a temporary home for the museum. Using vacant building owned by Florida Progress, the museum was designed by the Junior League and Hands-On, Inc., a Maryland company. The Junior League and Times Publishing agreed to donate $100,000 each to the museum. The Junior League also launched a campaign to raise an additional $400,000 to pay for 6 exhibitions. The 1980s could also be considered as a decade of Junior League follies. In 1981, the League marked its golden anniversary with an affair to remember, and again in 1984 they did another show which raised $72,000. And in 1989, the final Follies of the decade was held in February. It was a busy, demanding, rewarding, and constantly changing decade, and the League grew stronger because of it. The 7th decade was a busy one. In 1989 to 90, the thrift shop turned over revenues in excess of $70,000. This would be the last year that the thrift shop was able to produce such revenue. This set the stage for the eventual closing of the thrift shop in 1995 and 96. The membership was ready for a shift to the popular one-day sale format. So in 1995, the League put together possibly the largest League committee ever in order to ensure the one-day sales event success. The first year garnered $13,000 and opened the door for outstanding revenue the next year with over $58,000 being collected. But this fundraiser would have a short life. By 2000, collecting, storing, pricing, moving, and managing the quota became too much for the membership. In 2001, the one-day sale committee recommended that the sale be discontinued as a major ways and means for the League and be replaced with an event less labor-intensive for League members. During this decade of fundraising changes, the League positioned itself to spend fewer dollars on the running of its own organization. League headquarters was moved out of the Lard Building into the Stewart Building, and eventually into All Children's Child Development Center, for an incredible lease of $1 per year. Near the end of the decade, the membership approved a budget where 100% of administrative expenses were covered by the dues of the membership. While the fundraising side of the League was going through challenges, the fund-giving side continued to fund projects it deemed valuable. The Pinellas County Educational Foundation, USF Oceanography Camp for Girls, American Stage Children's Theater, Mainsail Art Festival, and many other local projects. The League developed a vision statement which read, "The Junior League of St. Petersburg envisions a community where individuals and family have access to resources that assist in the development of healthy life skills." With this in mind, a new project was developed for the summer of 1996, a back-to-school care fair. This was a low-dollar, high-impact project to provide services to over 2,500 children and families. With the closing of the thrift shop and the termination of the one-day sale, fundraising revenues were down. A conscious decision was made not to allocate major funds until a League-developed project could be established. The League determined that a large project was needed to galvanize internal and external League community support. In 1997, the League began researching a high-dollar, high-impact project. The membership was surveyed, the data collected, in keeping with the vision of life skills for healthy families. The Family Visitation House was born and opened in the spring of 2001. In its 8th decade, the Junior League continued to add events to improve member satisfaction and raise funds for programs. Party Time Golf previewed in 2003 and was a proven fundraiser. Jelly Bean Fling, a member satisfaction event, was held at Sunken Gardens in Great Exploration's Hands-On Museum. All hands were on deck for the ever-popular Celebrate the Season, a 3-day holiday gift mart. It debuted in November 2003 at St. Petersburg's historic Coliseum. Over the years, Care Fair moved venues from P-Tech to Tropicana Field to Johns Hopkins Middle School, and finally settled in Midtown's Johnny Ruth Clark Health Center. The city of St. Petersburg joined the event with a successful bike rodeo and safety fair. The League hosted its first inaugural mayoral ball in 2006 with the Boys and Girls Club of the Suncoast, Pinellas Education Foundation, and mayors, mentors, and more, each receiving $35,000 donations. The League's last signature project was created over a 3-year commitment. $50,000 was donated to Close to Kids to establish a Southside distribution center and store. The League logged thousands of hours with more than 150 volunteers sorting clothing, painting, and setting up the store. On February 19, 2010, the League held its second mayoral ball and raised money for Brookwood, St. Petersburg Museum of History, and Dr. Carter G. Woodson African American History Museum. In the midst of this busy decade, the League celebrated its 70th anniversary in conjunction with the Association of Junior Leagues International's 100th anniversary. In addition, 5 years later, we celebrated our 75th anniversary by inviting over 85 current and former community partners to a cocktail party honoring their commitment to Pinellas County and its citizens. In our 9th decade, the Junior League pivoted away from signature projects and transitioned to an issue-based community impact framework in order to encourage more collaborations and deeper long-term impacts. After input from the membership and extensive research, the Junior League focused in on 3 vital areas: nutrition, literacy, and health. Going forward, programs and partnerships would mirror these priority areas. In 2011, the Junior League celebrated its 80th anniversary and launched its first Kids in the Kitchen. The Whale of a Sale pop-up was brought back as a fundraiser in 2012 and 2013. The League hosted its 3rd mayoral inaugural ball, raising funds for St. Pete's Promise and the League. In a mode to think outside of the box, the Junior League hosted a kickball tournament, Showdown on the Playground. And with the growth of Care Fair, a fundraiser was launched for it called Brews for Backpacks. 3 popular fundraisers emerged: the Literacy Gala, the Little Black Dress, and Cocktails and Coutures. Funds raised were used to support a variety of community partnerships, such as the Kind Mouse, St. Petersburg Free Clinic, several Title I elementary schools, and Girls on the Run. An ad hoc diversity and inclusion committee was created and serves as an important training component for the membership. And lastly, a board position for diversity and inclusion was created. As we move through our 10th decade, this past year and its challenges have reminded us just how important the Junior League is to not only St. Petersburg, but Pinellas County and the Tampa Bay area. In 1927, a handful of women were asked to address a need and to believe that against all odds they could and would be successful. That mindset that belief in the mission, that courage of one's convictions, and the belief that lives can be made better is no different 90 years later for the members of the Junior League of St. Petersburg.